de vida e pelo mundo, né? Hoje a gente vai falar de uma nova perspectiva para o tratamento e prevenção do maior mal hoje contra a saúde humana, que é o câncer. Eu tive pessoas na família, né, que morreram de câncer e eu realmente gostaria de ter tido conhecimento do que nós vamos falar hoje aqui, enquanto havia tempo de ajudar as pessoas ainda. Eu peço que você compartilhe esse conteúdo com quem puder, realmente estamos falando em salvar milhões de vidas por aí pelo mundo, né? Aqui eu aproveito para, antes de a gente começar, para convidar quem ainda não é par, não é um membro VIP da Tribo Forte, para se tornar um e ter acesso ao portal e ao fórum de membros, onde você encontra informação privilegiada lá dentro e atual, postada diariamente sobre alimentação, saúde, exercício, qualidade de vida e bem-estar. Anote aí para entrar no site depois desse podcast, é o triboforte.com.br. Bom, enquanto o Dr. Souto está aproveitando suas férias, merecidas férias, o meu convidado especial e ilustre de hoje é talvez no mundo todo a pessoa que seja mais à frente dos estudos sobre a cura e prevenção do câncer, utilizando o novo paradigma que ataca as causas do problema e não as consequências. A pergunta principal aqui pode ser: câncer é só uma questão de azar genético ou chance ao acaso? Ou será que talvez nós estejamos causando esse problema através do nosso estilo de vida e hábitos alimentares? O meu convidado hoje é o professor Thomas Seyfried, do Boston College, e autor do livro Cancer as a Metabolic Disease. Ele acredita que câncer não é uma doença genética, mas sim uma doença metabólica, mitocondrial, e você vai entender mais sobre isso durante a nossa conversa aqui de hoje. Bom, nós vamos mudar agora para o inglês, né? Lembrando que você pode ver a transcrição completa em português no emagrecerdevez.com e a nossa conversa em vídeo com legendas também em português no canal oficial do Emagrecer de Vez no YouTube. Good afternoon, Professor. It's a great honor to have you here today. So how your day has been going so far?
Well, thank you very much, Rodrigo. It's a real pleasure to be on your show and have the opportunity to discuss some of our ideas regarding the origin, prevention and management of cancer.
Yeah, I think it's a very big subject, and I don't see quality information being spread in the world, let's say, but in Brazil even less. So it's a very good thing that we have in this chat today. Data from the American Cancer Society, right, show that more than 1,600 people die of cancer per day in the U.S. alone. Is that correct?
Well, that's the numbers that they provide every year. They come out with their overall assessment of the cancer problem. And what I've done is catalog these numbers over the years. And in general, what's very interesting is the number of new cases has increased dramatically, almost astronomically, in the United States. And I think this is pretty much the same in most countries. Most countries, Western civilization countries, let's put it that way. And I think that's due in part to the better technologies for screening and identifying cancer. But also troubling, and even more troubling, is the continual increase in the the numbers of people dying per year. And if you look at the data from the last four years, the rate of increases, the rate of increases of deaths is now faster than the rate of increases than new cases. The relative rate, not the numbers of people, the relative rate, which is very troubling because it says that we are not making any major progress in managing the disease. And people can argue with that, but the numbers of dead people, I think, speak for themselves. If there were a dramatic reduction in cancer or a powerful new treatment, we would expect to see a dramatic drop in deaths, very similar to what was seen in the AIDS crisis. Because before the protease cocktails came around, AIDS was a lethal disease. People were dying in mass numbers, and then a therapy was developed. Now, it doesn't cure the disease, but it certainly led to a precipitous drop in the number of deaths. And we don't see anything like that in the cancer problem. So until we begin to see something like that, we have to ask ourselves, what's happening? What are we doing with all this research and money and investment? Obviously, something is seriously wrong here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we most commonly talk about obesity here, and I think it's the same thing. All the time you see new diets, new treatments coming, new medicine coming out, and we don't see the levels dropping at all, or any markers of metabolic disease decreasing. It's just increasing. I believe cancer is the same as you're saying. So the main paradigm right now, it states that cancer is a genetic disease, right? And just a matter of bad luck. So the new paradigm, or the paradigm I believe you are in forefront of this, is the cancer as a mitochondrial metabolic disease, right? Which I think is very interesting. It's very difficult to ignore these type of things. And meaning it's not genetic, at least in the great majority of the cases, let's put it this way. But instead, it's caused by the way we eat and the lifestyle we carry, I believe. So what can you say about it?
Well, I think that's right. We have been led down a path of misinformation for so many decades now. And one has to go back and look at the historical perspective on how that happened, the view of cancer as a genetic disease. The time of right after the Second World War, there had been a lot of work on the virus-induced cancers and a variety of questions regarding, how does this disease arise? Is it an infectious agent? Is it a virus? Is it this? Is it that? But I think the discovery of the DNA structure with Watson and Crick just had such a profound effect on the mentality of science and medicine at that time. It was almost like a tranquilization of the mind, where people just ran off in a stampede, because it was found that if you look at gene expression in cancer, of course it's abnormal. So if almost the entire scientific field is looking now to bring a science of medicine and biology down into the molecular level. There's also been an envy of physicists in science for centuries. Physicists have always been recognized as the pure thinkers of the natural world. Biology was always a very vague, very difficult to define, with too many variables. It wasn't as quantitative. The biochemists were bringing it down. But when you find gene mutations at the molecular level that now may be playing some role, it was just so exciting to think that, we can take this very ambiguous field of biology related to medicine and cancer and kind of bash it down into a molecular, an understanding at the molecular level, a reductionist, as they say, reducing it down. And now we become more molecular, more precise, more physics-like. And in a sense, nothing could be further from the truth with respect to the origin of cancer and how we deal with it. This is a human disease tied into our own societies, the foods that we eat, the kinds of lifestyles that we have. This is every bit as much of a person, a sociology, a personage kind of a problem. And not only changes at the molecular level. And now we have seen this morph into an industrial-wide approach to this disease, where all of the new therapies are based on some molecular changes, which have enormous financial benefits for those that are participating in this activity. The research grants are awarded to those individuals that are looking at cancer at the molecular level. Much less is given to other aspects of our behavior that predisposes us to the disease, or even nutritionally manage the disease. These are less quantifiable, but nevertheless extremely powerful in how we're going to address the disease. So we have a major issue here. It's that we have a massive misunderstanding of what the nature of this disease is. And it is not a nuclear genetic disease. It is a mitochondrial metabolic disease. And once this becomes more understood at the biochemical and molecular and physiological levels, only then will we begin to see a shift in the direction where eventually we will drop the numbers of dead people just as precipitously as was done for the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah, it just seems that people just run around all these mutations and the mechanisms of all the mutations, and we all know that cancer have all kinds of mutations, right? But they also have something in common that all the cancer cells have, which is a problem in the way they work with glucose, right? They all can't respire properly, or all the cells, the cancer cells, can't breathe properly. So their respiration mechanism is kind of broken. So they all ferment for energy because of that, right? And that happens in all the cancer cells. So that's something we know they have in common, right? So that gives you a little bit of a hint of what the cause is, right?
Yes, that's very important, and that's a very clear idea of what the problem is. And every cell in the tumor is a different genetic entity, and they have hundreds and thousands of mutations, all different kinds. Driver, passengers, initiators, facilitators. They name all these different classes of mutations. But you're right, all the cells are fermenting. Now, how aggressive the tumor is is linked to how much it ferments. So the most aggressive tumors are the greatest fermenters, and the most indolent, slowest growing tumors are partially fermenters. So no matter how you look at it, the question then is, why are the tumor cells fermenting? So if you are part of the gene dogma, you will say the tumor cells are fermenting because they have mutations in oncogenes that make them ferment. Right. Okay. On the other hand, if you have damaged respiration, they are fermenting. And we know that when we stop breathing, lactic acid builds up in our body because our cells begin to ferment. They can't get oxygen. So they throw out lactic acid, just like the tumor cell. Now, the cancer cell is locked into this state of fermentation. So what kind of genetic changes would occur to lock in a cell in fermentation? And that is these oncogenes. So the oncogenes are essentially facilitators of the fermentation metabolism. But if you allow those cells to respire, the oncogenes turn off. So clearly the oncogenes are an effect. They're not the cause of the disease. They're facilitating the ability of that cell to stay alive because it can't respire effectively. And if it doesn't respire effectively, it either ferments or it dies. So these oncogenes are facilitating this locked-in metabolism. They're not the cause, because if you give them new respiration, the oncogenes turn off and they become normal again. So clearly they're responsive. They're not the cause, they're the effect. Yet this simple concept is almost impossible for the scientific field to understand. And they will find every kind of an exception based on a flawed experimental system to hold on to the idea that this is a genetic disease. So until that becomes changed, and where it's going to change is the lay people will make the change, not the top guys. They're locked into this. They're locked into the dogma, and it's very hard to break the dogma. So when I look at cancer as a mitochondrial metabolic disease with metabolic solutions, who would like the solutions? The cancer sufferers. The patients would like this. Yep. So the patients will put the pressure on the establishment to make the change, because the establishment's solution to this problem is a failed one. It's based on a flawed scientific concept.
It's scary how similar it is to nutrition in general. You probably know that, of course. The dogma is just impossible to break, and I think it will take a generation to start changing. When the old guys start fading out, the new generation will not be able to ignore. And like you said, I think people, they're getting real results out of nutrition, or getting real results out of focusing on the cause of cancer that you're talking about. They're getting real results. So I think these people are going to create a demand for it, and people will not be able to ignore all of this. But for people that are new to this concept of cell fermentation, because I think this is key to everything, we talk about the field to cancer cells, right? So can you just explain to people that are new to it how a normal cell process energy and how a cancer cell process energy, so people understand better the differences?
Well, I think the best way a good way to address that question is to think about the origin of life on the planet. There was a time on this